Hey, I'm Sid Brandy. I'm a CEO and co-founder at GitLab, and I'm here with Ty, and we're going to talk about remote work and creating ownership while working remotely. Ty, thanks for the call.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time. It's an honor. It's fun to be live to the internet as well. Hi, Mom. Hi, GitLab. And I've been an admirer and a fan of GitLab for a long time, in addition to our company being a user of GitLab. So we're a Cantilever. We're a 11-person web consultancy, and we use GitLab for all of our DevOps. So
thanks for using GitLab. Appreciate it.
Though I don't pay you very much, and that's one thing I want to talk to you about. But the other aspect in which we've been big fans of GitLab is the handbook. So we have a public handbook that's in some ways modeled after what you do. And I've kind of tracked a lot of the ways that you've approached key issues in my own thinking as a CEO frequently. So I'm very grateful for you putting everything out there. All those resources are super helpful.
You're welcome.
So yeah, we can dive right in on the ownership stuff, and I'm very curious also to get Fernando and Dan's thoughts on it. But I think that's one of the main things that I struggle with as a remote leader, is making sure that people feel like that the company is really a thing, that there's a shared identity, there's shared mission, and it seems like that's something that's really strong at GitLab. So I was wondering how you have cultivated that, and things you've tried that have worked and things you've tried that haven't worked, and what your experience has been.
Yeah, I think culture is a few things at GitLab and a few things it's not. So first of all, it's shared values, which we try to reinforce in 17 different ways. The second thing, it's a shared way of working. So we're pretty prescriptive about how we do things. Third, and probably most important, it's camaraderie. It's like having a deeper relationship with some of the team members, and that's something we try to stimulate. For example, with social calls and social functions, so that you get to know people outside of the direct, like, day-to-day work interaction.
Right.
And I don't know, I just retweeted a video that one of our salespeople recorded, where he did a great karaoke version of a popular song and made it into something super fun about GitLab. It can also be that, like, it can be a conversation about something that's very meaningful to someone outside of work, and also be kind of doing fun and quirky things. And then also one thing it's not, culture is not that we're similar, that we're all attending just after university or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Do you think people come in with a GitLab-y mentality and a sort of similar, or this level of dedication that they would do, a karaoke song, that kind of thing? Or is that something you cultivate and you build over time as you build equity with people?
Yeah, a few things. Like, I think, like, I've heard that person's not googly and stuff like that. Like, I think that can turn. I'm not sure that happened at Google, but I think that's not a criteria we have. I think that would reek to going to, like, recruiting people similar to yourself that you can recognize yourself in. I think we ask for people to, like, subscribe to our values. We put them in the offer letter. People can look them up beforehand, and hopefully they're also excited about most of our strategy and how we work. And some of it, hopefully they want to change, and they'll advocate for that. We do look for managers of one, people who can manage themselves. And we look for examples of iteration and ownership in the work history of people.
Right. Yeah, so it sounds like it's somewhat of a combination, but it's also true that when you give people the ability to take ownership, some people will, right? Like, some people don't have that opportunity normally.
Yeah, that's true, but I think with interviewing, it's much more effective to talk about like what people did in the past than to try to architect all kinds of trick questions where they have to give the right answer. I think people's past is very indicative of people's future.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering about your sort of day-to-day mentality. I feel like I'm often obsessive about all the things that I need to fix or feel that I need to fix, and it's hard to escape that or just accept that there are always going to be things to fix. So I wonder if that's common with your experience and how you approach that. Do you see GitLab as done at any given point, and the handbook and all this stuff, and how otherwise do you avoid falling into like a vortex of things that need to happen?
Yeah, it's certainly not done. And yes, you have to prioritize. Like, you can't tell people to do 10 big lifts in a quarter. On the other hand, you're also the main janitor. And whenever there's something on the floor of the parking lot, it's up to you to clean that up. So just before this call, I noticed that we had some graphs with strange labels and strange titles. And I put a note in the hallway section of one of our executives, like, hey, this is there. And I think you don't make it bigger than it is. Don't make it a priority. But it's okay to point out that the parking lot needs some cleaning.
Yes. And how is your team at just taking an input like that and converting that into some output? And do you write that down so that you can check in on it? Do you have someone whose job is to check in on it, or do you just really trust and believe in your people and that's going to happen?
I think it's not an either or. We try to write a lot down. Like, we have the shadows on the call, and the last thing they wrote down is like, hey, when you have a call and you do a round of introductions, make sure you're not presenting at the same time, because then nobody can see each other's faces, and it's kind of important because people are introducing themselves, and if you were in a room, it would be really rude not to look at the person who was introducing themselves. So things like that, you write them down, and then I think depending on how important something is, you verify that it happens. Like this thing, like, it's not a big thing, so it's just a written rule, and can maybe remind someone politely. Something is really important, you have checks and balances, and you have people checking each other's work.
Right. Yeah, it seems like there's also this culture of doing that as well, that you encourage people to notice things and be mindful and tell other people when that's the case. So it seems like it's a self-reinforcing behavior in some ways.
Hopefully, at least I'm saying handbook first a lot less than I was saying 3 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I heard an interview with you where you were saying that it's a curve, right? So you do a lot of work at the beginning to get very little benefit, and then over time, the benefits start to outweigh the work, and that we've
exactly. It's handbook first is more work for whatever change an individual wants to make, but the benefits accumulate over time for the entire organization.
Right. Yeah, one thing I was wondering about is, like, you also have a philosophy of iteration, shipping fast, and that kind of thing. And so I was wondering how you balance those two things. So is it how do you ship fast and iterate while also maintaining documentation oriented mentality?
Yeah, so I think a few things, like the bar for the documentation goes down. Like, it's fine. Like, you can use our handbook as a scratch.
Mm-hmm.
It's always in draft. It's fine, as long as, if it's important, like, you note the status of something, but most of the time it's not that important. It's just any documentation is better than nothing. And then one thing with documentation is that many people treat that as an after the fact thing. So it's really important that it's in the handbook immediately. So you have to communicate your change anyway. Just do it in the handbook. And then we can always make a nicer list or add bullet points or graphics later on.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering about how you look at GitLab and your role, and whether you see GitLab as something that you are trying to make as independent as possible, so that it could run a, if you got hit by a bus or something, and or whether you deliberately take advantage of all of your skills to the maximum by putting yourself in positions that you kind of need to be in as a CEO. Like, there's different mentalities there, I think, different industries.
Yeah. I think any good person in an organization is always trying to kind of automate themselves out of a job, or like make sure that the job is not dependent on them. Like, if you do the work right, it shouldn't be dependent on you. You should have it organized to a degree that people can work without you. I think it's tough when an organization is still growing to actually work yourself out of a job. Like, you work really hard in a year, and then the company grows 50%, and now there's a lot more stuff to do, and you have to start anew. So hopefully by trying to make things independent of you, you can keep scaling with the company. Because the moment that something is dependent on you, that is the time that you cannot make a promotion anymore. And as a CEO of a company, you're kind of like, every layer of management that added is kind of a promotion for you.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It seems also like you maintain like a pretty tree-oriented management approach. It's something we've also found to be very useful. But it seems like in the rest of startup land, there's some sort of aversion to that, like the idea that like you have a manager, and that their manager has a manager, and it's that linear. I wonder how that came about for you, and why you think that works.
Yeah, I think many startups I started by a small team of people that doesn't need a manager, and they kind of project that going forward. I think at scale you do need management and hierarchy, and if you're not going to define it formally, it will be defined informally, and that means it's less accountable, less equitable, less inclusive than it should be. So I'm a strong believer in a hierarchy. Hierarchy is essential to make decisions fast, and the success of a startup is very much related to your speed of making decisions. So we don't believe in like holistic management or something like that. We are trying to combine the best of like consent or holistic holacracy, I think I wanted to say. Yeah. And then we do want to combine the best of consensus organizations and hierarchical organizations. Obviously, the benefit of a hierarchy is you can make decisions fast, but the benefit of consensus organizations is that you can get anyone's input on it. So we split every decision in two. It's above the radar. We actively inform people about it. Everyone can contribute. In most cases, everyone in the whole world can give their opinion. Then the directly responsible individual, the person who has to do the work most of the time, can make a decision unilaterally without having to convince anybody, without having to create consensus. And that is essential, because as soon as you need to create consensus, you'll see decisions start flying under the radar because it's less work.
That's right. Yeah, it's like giving people permission to make a freaking decision. And you encounter so many organizations that are just completely paralyzed.
But you have to, as someone, the hard thing is, so you provide input on people's proposal, and then they're gonna do something else, and that's tough for people, and that's something you have to get used to at GitLab.
It's tough. You mean it's tough for the person getting the feedback, or the person giving? Oh, the person giving is not necessarily going to get their way. Yeah.
Well, it's both tough to receive the feedback, but if you don't have to listen to it, that's better. It's tough that you get really good data points, and then the DRI does something else, and they don't even owe you an explanation.
Right. Well, does that cause friction, or is it just taken as natural?
I'm not sure. Fernando, what do you think?
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question?
No problem. Whether if you provide input on a proposal and it's the DRI does something else, whether that introduces friction, whether that annoys people.
It depends. It really all depends on the situation. It depends on how critical the issue is. But if there is, if the DRI is doing something else and not actually doing the tasks that they're supposed to, I mean, usually like management or someone would come up and kind of assess the situation, but there doesn't usually cause friction. Everything's handled in a more polite way. That's one thing I would say.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And there's a lot in the handbook as well about assuming positive intent and about.
Yeah, exactly. So positive intent should be the first thing. It should be assumed that the DRI is not actually completing that task because they may have had something more urgent to work on.
Sure.
And I think the biggest thing is that communication is key. All this should be communicated, within the DRI to the person who submitted the request.
Yeah.
So there should be constant communication since we do operate all remote, and things should be known exactly where they are and what progress has been made on something. But if for some reason progress isn't being made, then someone can simply just reach out and ask. And I think assuming good intent to why something wasn't accomplished should be the first thing to consider.
Right. Yeah. How do you manage and stay like super efficient? Because I know efficiency is one of the values. It seems like you're a very, very efficient organization, and it's not quite clear to me how that came about, but it's probably too many things to me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is preventing overlapping responsibilities. That is the source of a lot of inefficiency. So if you Google GitLab product categories, you'll find exactly split out like who does what in the application and who their stable counterparts are, who they normally work with.
Yeah.
That's the same, like every good sales organization has that, like you have certain accounts that you're working on and others. And I think it's important to have that in every single part of the organization so that everyone clearly knows the scope of their responsibility. Otherwise, a lot of energy can go into determining that.
Yeah. What's on your mind most days? Are you the kind of guy who will, stay up or be up late, worrying about extra large problem? You see, you're so chill, and it seems like you have really thought through a lot of things. So I wonder if that's just how it is, or if you.
I don't know. This week there was one time that I woke up in the middle of the night. I thought, oh my goodness, and it was about a promotion. There was a promotion proposed, and I don't think, first of all, that department was over the promotion rate. Second, that specific team of people haven't achieved the results that they should achieve. So it can still be a good reason there can still be like an individual, like a person is not their team's work, and there can be reasons, but it's something I was worrying about, like, hey, promotions, I think, are the main indicator of what the company values, who's getting promoted for what. And I want to make sure we nail each and every one of them. And people look at them like, yeah, I understand that. And that's according to our values.
Right. Did you update the handbook? Or was it that you weren't?
No, I'm in the approval loop for that. And I was like, I really need to discuss that with the sponsor of that promotion and try to and have a conversation.
Yeah. What's your mentality around like your time management and stuff? Do you have like a particular philosophy or approach or system, or?
I have a lot of things. I have very, very specific requests for how the agenda is maintained and the notes are taken for any meetings. We start on time, we end on time. If something is like less than 2 minutes, I try to take care of it immediately. And I got, of course, a big support network of people who handle things. Like more and more of my communication is just a draft that someone sends me that I have to post somewhere. Like it has to come from the CEO, but they are much better at phrasing it and sending the right message.
Aha, that's a good trick. And what do you do in your free time?
Yeah, I've recently taken up road biking. That was fun. On Sunday, I did a 1.5 hour bike ride. It was amazing. And recently got a garden, so had a gas-powered weed whacker. That was fun. Yeah. So, how about you?
Once you get into cycling, you never want to stop. That's one of my hobbies. It's so much fun.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think people get addicted.
I could totally see that. Oh, and I went skating yesterday evening, but only for like 10 minutes because I was exhausted. These off-road skates, and I think they're not very efficient as a means of propulsion, but it's good. I want to preserve my Dutch route and do some speed skating.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, they're amazing. How did that happen? Enclosed space.
Sorry?
They like going around in a circle because it's an enclosed space.
Yeah.
Why are they so good at the speed skating?
Yeah, it's really silly, but so the normal speed skating is going around in circles. However, there's this one event in the Netherlands. Sometimes it's organized when it's all frozen over, and they skate between 11 cities, and that is
cool.
That's less of skating in the circle. Oh. But all the water between the cities has to freeze over. So.
Right. Slight challenge, slight obstacle.
Hasn't happened in like last 20 years.
Yes. Yeah. To answer your question, I run on occasion. I like to play golf. I play games. I'm really into Magic the Gathering. I've always played that. So I'll play that whenever I get a chance. But I have 2 little kids, so it doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, when they're old enough, you can try to get them into Magic the Gathering. It's a timeless game, apparently, if it's still being played now.
Totally timeless. Yeah. Well, what's funny now is like all the cards that people wanted when they were kids, they're like, going to Silicon Valley and making a bunch of money, and that's now that it's inflating the cost of all these rare cards from 1994. So
nice.
They use Black Lotuses and stuff. You can't get them anymore because too many tech pros are chucking money at it. So it's like
when I was young, I was so annoyed by the music in restaurants and shops. Now I'm like, they're playing my music. I'm like, oh, I get it now. They're playing music for like middle-aged people because that's the people who buy. This is amazing to be middle-aged.
Yeah, like I figure when I understand all the questions on the crossword, I'm probably old. That's probably how it works. So. I know we're coming up to our time, but I wanted to give you some feedback. The main thrust of my feedback, there's other things that I will submit in a merge request. But the main thing is that, we are an 11-person agency. We have tried Gold. We like a lot of the features, but we probably would only use like maybe 2 or 3 frequently, mainly around merge request workflow.
Uh-huh.
And in order to get those, to get the things that we would want, we would need silver, and silver would be like $200 a month. So for us, the cost benefit of that doesn't really make sense. So we're just on the free plan.
Yeah. So and did you use GitLab to like release and secure your software too, or just for that?
We do. We have maybe 3 projects that we use the CI. And so my feedback for you is that I think you should be charging me more, because we ship a lot of software on your platform, and the free platform, I feel like, gives you, 80 or 90% of what you need as a small organization like ours. So, I don't know what the solution is necessarily there, but I think there's maybe room to experiment some with the feature groupings so that you could get a package together that works for a small agency that's more in the 8 a user a month kind of thing tier.
Cool. Thanks for that. Appreciate the feedback.
And the other feedback I had for you is that, I don't claim to be an expert, but when absolutely, Fernando, go ahead. When I was first getting used to the product, as a front-end developer mainly, and working on a team, it was hard for me to absorb that this is something I can use instead of GitHub. So because you talk about all the great capabilities of it, like I just went to the about site, the public site today, and it's centered around really advanced level features. And I think that could be totally the right idea because of the market segment that you're targeting. But for agencies, I think it might look a little intimidating. And when we got into it because we had a DevOps person who wanted us to use GitLab, namely for the CI. And once we started, we were like, oh my God, this is way better in all these different aspects that we didn't quite understand, just as a drop-in replacement for GitHub. Cool. So there might be some additional room for evangelism to people who are not necessarily, hardcore shippers, but are building websites, building, simpler software, and doing it for a living, and you can benefit a lot from the tool.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, it was really fun, a pleasure, and I'll let you know someday if I'm ever out by you. It'd be fun to take you out to dinner. I know the restaurants you like, so just
love that. Thanks.